This is why stretching isn't fixing your back pain. Probably one of the most common questions I get is, Nate, what stretches should I be doing for my back pain? Or another really common thing people will say is, well, I know I'm just not stretching enough. I need to do that more. But what if I told you that stretching isn't the solution and a lack of stretching isn't the problem? So the common claim when it comes to stretching is that we need to release tight muscles or loosen them up or increase the length of certain muscles in relation to other ones. You'll hear stuff like this all the time, that you need to stretch out your hip flexors or your hamstrings in order to balance out your pelvic position, or decrease your lumbar lordosis and straighten out your spine. Now, the first thing I'll say is that stretching is not a bad thing. It's not harmful, it's not gonna make things worse, but I think the worst part about stretching is that it's usually a distraction and it's just focusing on the wrong thing. We have tons of research and evidence on things like pelvic positions and postures, weak and tight muscles, and these things just don't reliably correlate or contribute to long-term back pain. If they did, or if we had really solid evidence that correcting these things or fixing your posture through stretching was effective, I would be here telling you to do that stuff. But we just don't have that evidence, and so I think for most people, it's a distraction and a waste of time. And trust me, I did this for years. I spent a good 3 or 4 years trying to stretch away my back pain. And it was always the same thing. It was maybe a little bit of short-term relief, but it never got me anywhere long-term or really got me out of the cycle. I think one of the biggest issues I have with stretching is that it's a mostly passive process. You find some muscle to isolate, you get in a position, and you crank on the joint until you feel that stretch. And then you just sort of hold it there for an arbitrary amount of time before letting it go. It doesn't really mimic anything we do in everyday life or increase your tolerance to common movements that cause pain. Sure, it might get your hip flexors or your hamstrings a little bit more tolerant to an end range stretch, but that's kind of the extent of its helpfulness, especially with a specific goal of getting out of back pain. What I think is a much more pragmatic and straightforward approach to corrective exercise or mobility drills is figuring out which movements your back actually has the most discomfort or pain with, and to scale those back to the easiest possible starting point that you can do today. So for example, if you have pain with twisting or bending forward, instead of doing a bunch of arbitrary stretching drills, why don't we figure out a version of stretching or bending forward that you're able to tolerate right now, but that we can slowly increase the strength and resilience of going forward. We'll use flexion or bending forward as the example because that's usually the most common. So if you're like I was, where just the idea of bending down or trying to touch your toes or pick up something heavy off the ground is painful, then that's probably a motion or a quote-unquote corrective exercise that you can start working on. But the important part here is finding the starting point. You definitely don't want to start with the most painful or uncomfortable version of bending forward. You want to start with something that's subtle and easy to do right now, but is still working on that fundamental movement of flexing or bending your back. Now, the irony is that as you start to scale up this movement and increase the range and the difficulty of it, you're probably going to get a lot of those benefits that you were trying to get from stretching. You might seriously increase the flexibility and range of your hamstrings by working on a forward flexing movement. The same goal that you might have had when doing isolated hamstring stretching. But in this case, you're actually working on something that involves the back and mimics something that you do in everyday life. The other part of this that I think is really important to mention is that feeling of stiffness or tightness in your muscles might be more of a result of the pain rather than a cause of it. We usually think of this backwards. We think that the tight muscle is what's causing the pain. But who's to say that the underlying pain isn't causing stiffness and guarding and rigidity in your body? So again, that tightness that you're feeling may very well be a result or a symptom of the pain rather than the thing that's directly causing it. And I think that's a really important distinction to make because it gets you out of the mindset of I need to stretch this in order to get out of pain. And rather in the mindset of if I work on the pain directly and increasing my tolerance, the stiffness and the guarding that I feel will likely go away as a result. So this is just something to think about. Again, you don't have to stop stretching. If you have stretches that feel good and get you moving, then absolutely go for it and keep those in your routine. Just don't get stuck on the stretching hamster wheel that I was on and that most people get stuck on, where you feel like you need to stretch religiously in order to prevent pain or get out of pain. As always, if you need more structured help actually getting out of long-term back pain for good, that doesn't involve endless hours of stretching stretching, I would highly encourage you to start a free trial of our program Back Unbroken. It's a step-by-step game plan for how to actually get out of long-term back pain. You get support from me and the team. And again, it starts with a free trial to make sure it's the right fit for you before you pay anything. I'll leave a link down below if you want to check out more details about the program or watch our free masterclass. But whatever you do, stay hopeful, don't give up, and I'll see you in the next video.